You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston, your home for uncensored news and underground music since 2011.
All right, another episode of Live Free, Think Free on KPFT Houston. How you doing, Derrick?
I'm doing good, man. Welcome back, everybody. Happy to have you here with us. As Micah said, we broadcast on KPFT in Houston, also the Conscious Resistance Network. We're currently live on Rockfin, on Odyssey, on Facebook, and YouTube as well. And this will be reposted on BitChute and several other platforms, also on Spotify. You can always find us at Live Free, Think Free. If you search that on your favorite podcast platform, Live Free, Think Free, or just go to thehoustonfreethinkers.com. We always post the weekly archives and the sources. So everything that we cover in the next hour here, all the stories we go over, we will make sure to put there for you, and you can follow up and do your own research, come to your own conclusions. But yeah, it's good to be here for another week, Micah. I mean, I got some different stories. I know you got a few stories we're going to get into. We got a short interview we're going to play here in just a moment. But, you know, one of the things I wanted to spend a couple moments talking about, if we could, as we welcome our audience in with us this evening, is that it's been, I know you've been involved in activism longer than I have been, but for myself, it's been going on the 13th year here. But really, I felt like the 10 years ago, 2012, was really a big year for both of us, I think, with the group, the Houston Freethinkers, and just with working with and the Fed groups and all kinds of different activists and artists and musicians in the Houston community, specifically in the downtown Houston area, but really all over the city. And yeah, 2012, 10 years ago, was a big year in a lot of ways. And I wrote a blog earlier today on my website. People can check it out at derrickbros.com if they're interested. Just kind of reminiscing on all the things that happened in 2012, Micah. Because if you remember, and you guys take your minds back to, let's say, late 2011, was when the Occupy movement launched, not only in Occupy Wall Street in New York City, but hundreds of cities around the world, including Houston. So Occupy Houston launched in September 2011. Our activist community, the Houston Freethinkers, was very involved, and we went and collaborated. And, you know, we didn't always agree with the people organizing under the Occupy banner, but we did a lot of marches together. We worked together where we could. And it was a hectic 5 months. And we were just talking about off air, it was an everyday thing. Like for this period of our lives, it was literally every day there was some kind of activism thing going on, or a march or a rally or a benefit show or a radio show to do or politician to confront.
You'll remember multiple things, right? Multiple things. I mean, it went from the time we woke up to the time we passed out. So, I mean, really, that's pretty much how every day was. With occasional days off, but probably less than working a normal job, and for months, maybe even years. And that's the thing about 2012. It was already a culmination of work, as you mentioned, that had been going on for a year and a half or more. So I don't know, maybe I think a little bit of that, a little bit of being honed and being able to get up and go to City Hall, get up and go to these things, have your equipment with you, all these little things, have your flyers already made and with you, you know, meet the other people to take them with you, or you know, arrange for rides for people. There's a lot of little nuanced detail that in the reflection on it we kind of forget, but I think that's part of it. Like any job, it's being like on your chops, for to say. And I think at that point, HFT as an activist group or as a hub of activism, however you want to see it, had become like that.
Absolutely. And for those who follow the Conscious Resistance on social media or on our video platforms, earlier today, I actually posted this video while I'm playing it on the screen right now. This is an interview that happened. This was early 2012. So just to kind of like briefly track a trajectory of what happened to the Houston Freethinkers in 2012. What I was just describing a moment ago, we were working with like the Occupy movement. We were doing a lot of really active things. Come to January, when most, I think if not all of the cities had been cleared out of the parks around the world, the Occupy movement effectively came to an end. And the Houston Freethinkers, we had launched a sort of offshoot focusing on the Federal Reserve, Occupy the Fed, it was called. And so it was just a super busy time. And at the end of that, we decided we're going to throw a big party to say thank you to all the people who've been supporting us, not just the activists on the street with us, but people were donating money and supplies and all kinds of things, moral support, sharing our videos. It was a very busy time, and the cops were getting to know our names and faces, and the politicians were. And so we threw this party called For the Community. It ended up being a music festival that went on for years that we did. And in some ways, I think it was, the success was attributed, at least in part, to the fact the first event happened and the Houston Police Department shows up and pulls a shotgun. They arrest me. They violently throw Micah around. You're about to see it on screen. Here you go. And yeah, they just act like crazed animal. This one cop, at least for sure. They arrest me. We collect the videotapes. We put it together, put out a press release, and within days, within 24 hours of the whole thing happening, it was all over the Houston media. You remember that, Mike? It was on every news station. It was on all the newspapers. Everybody was talking about it. The Houston Police Department even had to respond and make a statement. Micah and I went to the police department and gave our statements. Not that we were expecting anything to really come of it, and nothing did. They said they investigated and the officer acted within his rights or whatever. But that was one of the first things that went viral. And as you're seeing here, that led to an appearance on Alex Jones' show, which, I know a lot of people have issues with Alex Jones now and maybe always have, but he definitely was a different person, I'd say 10 years ago. And that was just one of the first incidents that got the Houston Freethinkers name out there, and locally and on a bigger level. What do you think about that, Micah? Just that whole period, that incident itself.
Yeah, I definitely remember For the Community, and I'd forgotten that Alex Jones had covered it. I know that a number of the local things, probably the Houston Chronicle and then, as you said, all the local media, the news stations, pretty much, maybe not all, but the majority of them. And yeah, we did definitely, I would say, exploit that to the benefit of For the Community, which became, as you said, went on for years and was always a free festival, celebrating that aspect of the first one that was just, given away for free. It was interesting because despite all that if you were watching with us, that you may have seen of red and blue lights and shotguns and stuff, the party kept going till 3 something in the morning, and that footage there is probably about 10 between 10:15 and 10:40. So yeah, that was a wake up call, I think, for a lot of people that were around, because there were hundreds of people at that event. And so, and of course,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the press coverage of it and seeing how that was dealt with. But it was interesting because, as we'd mentioned, the group had already been doing things for quite some time and was becoming effective in a lot of different ways. So I think perhaps one thing I remember about this is feeling perhaps that, because what the main thing is that they came into a private party and started going through everybody's stuff, and they came because of a sound complaint at 10:15, which is understandable, I guess. I mean, I guess that's what people expect sometimes. And rather than just dealing with it, they just started going through and saying all kinds of things and calling more people and more. And at the end of it, and I guess that was, as I said, we shut down the outside stages. The party went on till 3 a.m. Indoor dance party, and Days played around out by the fire along with other people. Unfortunately, they did arrest Derrick, I think, for not obeying an order or something like that. I was put in a back cop car whereby I was told that I was going to be let free, but I had to go tell those kids to go home or go back inside. And I said, well, then I guess I'm not being let go free, right? I mean, you're the authority. You go tell them what to do. And
check this out, Micah. This is just an example for those who weren't around at the time or don't know what we're talking about. I was telling you this earlier, this was like a real wake-up call to me. It was the first time I directly experienced all the local media showing up, acting friendly, and then running headlines or stories that were totally different than what we had said and what happened. And so this was, I think, CBS local news, titled HPD investigating clash between officers, partygoers at Houston Freethinkers event. And then the subheading, a local group of conspiracy theorists say their civil rights were violated when HPD crashed their party last month and detained 2 people. So of course, getting calling us conspiracy theorists in there, of course, and that was the first time I experienced something like that directly. I think I'd say pretty much like, I'd only been waking up really in a deep way, questioning things a couple of years. And that was just another another reminder of that. I want to show another example though, because a couple
I think
months
it's
after.
interesting because at that time, mostly all we had done was like Federal Reserve and TSA activity. Mostly things where standing around on the Constitution and things that most people profess that they think are kind of centered on human rights, or at least think are the base of the law of the land. These were kind of the things we were standing on. We just watched the bailouts make the banksters even more elite and get special privileges that no one else has. And
Mhm.
we're watching people's rights, the Fourth Amendment, people's right not to be searched, just go right out the window, because they decided to take an airplane, or as they pushed it to the buses. And I'm sure
Yep.
we'll get into
And
that now.
yeah, I just want to mention this one. We won't have to spend too much time on this. We do have some more important news to cover, but if you're listening free, but listening to Live Free, Think Free, and we are just, reminiscing. This was 10 years ago, activism and work that Micah and I were involved in. This one I think is most important because, the party was a good Houston event and institution, and I think it brought a lot of great memories to people. And that was our first way to kind of get beyond just Houston by going on Alex Jones's show. But then this incident happened a couple months later in April of 2012, 10 years ago. The Houston Police Department, as you can see, this was covered by RT. It was even covered by The Guardian. TSA's mission creep is making the U.S. a police state. Imagine a headline like that now. The out of control TSA is past pat downs at airports. Now it's checkpoints and roadblocks, talking about the expansion of the TSA. And that was what was going on in Houston. They were saying that they were going to start, or they did test it out, this program called Bus Safe, where they were going to start searching bus riders just for riding on the bus. You could get, random drug sniffing dog or purse or bag searched or show me your identification, these kinds of things. And we thought that was crazy. Apparently, some lawyers also thought that was crazy. And we were able to organize within a month, two different meetings, come to two different Metro board meetings, and effectively shut down the program. And it's 10 years later, and the program has never come back to life. And so, I shared this earlier on a video I did today that if that was the only thing I ever did in activism, then, that would be cool. I would be thankful for that because, this, Micah, it's not always like with your activism or even just your life that you can see the measurable effects of the things you'd like to do. A lot of activism is tireless things, like you're saying, standing on the street, standing up for things, holding the sign, confronting people who are doing bad things, trying to raise awareness about stuff. You get labeled all kinds of things. You get maybe not treated the best, especially if you're not, protesting or supporting the popular issues, the things you're supposed to support. And so it's rare that you actually see something positive come out of it. And in this case, we are able to go there, organize, and here's the follow-up. Metro says it won't do random bag checks, April 26, 2012. The announcement came in response to fiery comments from area residents and lawyers about the agency's decision to invite the TSA to join a security sweep of its system earlier this month, and its announcement that officers would perform random bag checks. Frequent Metro writer Derrick Bros references Fourth Amendment rights and criticized what he said was local and federal officers' questioning of riders during the April 13th sweep, asking where riders were coming from and where they often rode the bus they were on. And it goes on. But they ended up deciding to drop it. And Micah was there, myself, Steve Sussman, a bunch of friends, old friends, and lawyers from the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association showed up, and we showed them that this wasn't going to stand. And that was those videos. Some of them are still on YouTube, I think, on the Houston Freethinkers YouTube channel. If anybody wants to check it out, that's one of the times that, like, it actually, that we made a difference there. And now people, because of that, people in Houston are not being searched. And if we hadn't done that, maybe that program would still be there,
It's more or less this reason here, the desire to get up in your business, the desire to, what is it, get into your person, your effects, your things, your bags, your phones, your papers, without a probable cause. And we ran into this again around this same time when we went to document the Republican National Convention in Florida. And were detained for a short time by the Department of Homeland Security, stood on that same rights, and somehow, did not have the bag searched. We can look at that as a small victory as well. And I do think it's interesting, as you can see, all of this is every issue here is centered around Fourth Amendment issues here. Every single one of these, even the party one. And so I
That is
think
interesting.
that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, you're listening to Live Free, Think Free, guys. We've been just catching up on some memories 10 years ago. Been working together. Micah, I'm thankful for everything we got to do together at that time and for everybody else who was around at that time period. There was a really special time of the beginning of the Houston Freethinkers, 2010, 11, till I'd say it kind of really petered off 2017, 2018. But there was a couple of years where it was just, one of the best things I could have ever been involved in, and really cool to look back and see, the growth that happened, and that something like that, the TSA being removed off the buses, and some of the other things we did, that there's still a lasting impact. So I invite anybody else out there who thinks that your actions don't have an impact to really think about that. And also at the same time, I think it's an opportunity to reflect on the actions you do take. If the actions you take aren't leading to tangible changes in the ways you want, maybe it's time to try a new strategy. If watching YouTube videos all day and just having your biases confirmed and listening to the horrible things going on in the world isn't leading to something positive in your life, then maybe you should try different steps, right? Or if the podcast you're doing isn't really resonating with people, or if the flyers you're trying to hand out are not being received well, just rethink, be willing to kind of try different strategies. That's what the Houston Freethinkers did. We did everything and anything we could to try to reach people, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. So, yeah.
I think that's the truth, and I do think it brings a kind of a theme up that I'd like, hopefully people to reflect on more. What are you doing with your freedom? Maybe you're not as free as you'd like to be, but what are you doing with your freedom? What are the results? Where's the beautiful fruit of your freedom? Here we are. Freedom people need to start being able to advance this argument a little bit more. They need to start being aware of it in their lives and do something with it. So I mean, I'm not saying I shouldn't, but I'm getting more and more aware of that, and believe, it's kind of part of the solutions aspect of things. What can we deliver up in the works of freedom to show people? Otherwise, what do you have in the freedom conversation? News articles about the a monstrous statist octopus crawling into every aspect of existence. So we got to have something more, right? We got to have something more about the successes of freedom. And I think that takes place with each one of us, with each one of our time, because I mean that's so one of the most precious things. Almost all the most precious things are the things we get for free: love and time and all this stuff. And the most replaceable are the things we spend all this money on. So I do think that as far as in the fight of freedom, for freedom, and the discussion and the dialogue of freedom, those issues and issues of philosophic freedom, issues of maybe just personal freedom, entrepreneurial freedom, all these things need to take a greater I guess place in our life and in the discussion, and even in the recognition that what we spend our time on willingly is our use of our freedom. That's what we're cashing our freedom in.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Well, we're going to continue on, guys. You're listening to Live Free, Think Free here on the Conscious Resistance Network. Last week in Houston, after we aired our episode, there was an event. It was called the Texas Vaccine Policy Symposium. It was being brought to you by the Baker Institute, and it had 5 or 6 speakers, including a bioethicist from the University of Houston who was arguing against the idea that unvaccinated people should be protected and have bodily sovereignty. It was really interesting, Micah, these people, the way they talk.
you
It
have
was
the
just like,
opposite side, or was it a one-sided debate?
no, there was very one-sided, as these things usually are. And they
So
ended
you had a
with,
bioethicist, and they thought this was ethical to have a bioethicist
yeah,
at one point of view.
arguing that, basically the people, they're like the anti-vaxxers are trying to co-opt the language of bodily autonomy and this and that. They don't have any actual arguments. It's just co-opting, right? And it was, anyways, long story short, at the end of it was Peter Hotez, the man who makes it clear he's not willing to debate anybody and have any alternative opinions. We've talked about him plenty on this show. And during that event, somebody was there and chose to interrupt and say, hey, Pfizer, you guys are promoting Pfizer injections here, and they're the company that, excuse me, has one of the biggest criminal fines in history. Why is that anti-science to question their products or to have these kind of things? And this man was thrown out of the event, and I was able to actually speak with him. His name is Alex Rosen. He's based in Houston, and he does a lot of good work. I mean, I wasn't familiar with him prior to this, but I did get to talk with him. So we're going to go ahead and play this clip. You're listening to Live Free, Think Free. We'll be right back. Check out this interview with Alex Rosen. I think you're really going to enjoy this. We'll play a song. We'll be back with some more news here on Live Free, Think Free. back, everybody. This is Derrick Bros here with the Conscious Resistance Network and 90.1 KPFT Houston. So this last week in Houston, there was an event called the Texas Vaccine Symposium. And I was not in Houston, so I was unable to attend. But I had a number of friends reach out and send me the link and encourage me to watch online, because our old friend, Dr. Peter Hotez, the classic propagandist for the shots the last couple of years, and really somebody who says that people with other opinions are not even worth discussing, issues with, not even worth debating or having a conversation with. This man was speaking again in Houston, and I was unable to attend, but we did watch online. Myself and plenty of other people submitted questions. None of those questions got asked in the end, unsurprisingly. But thankfully, there was one man there, and that is my guest today, Mr. Alex Rosen, who was actually there at the event in person and, chose to exercise his voice and speak up, and was actually a man attempted to choke him, accost him for that. So let's get into that. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I mean, I think that the guy that you kind of tossed aside is probably not doing too well, but you did a great job defending yourself. We're going to talk more about some of the other work you do, but this is one of the forms of activism I would consider activism that you've taken on. What made you want to go to this event in the first place? And then we'll get into, what happened.
Well, I just want to shout out the current revolt. I'm not going to say who it was because I think she wants to keep attending these events, but there was somebody there that basically told me about it and signed me up. And I just went, and I knew I was going to end up crashing it because I always do that with like Beto O'Rourke and stuff like that. And just, after like an hour or two of listening to just cringe-inducing takes, I had to get somewhere. So I just crashed it and caused a ruckus. And by the way, my questions weren't answered either. I submitted 4 of them under different names. And some of the names were names that would be connected to a minority. So the fact they didn't answer those really struck me the wrong way. And it was just a very, very wacky event.
Yeah, and so let's talk about the content for a moment before we talk about what you interrupted, because I'm actually glad you interrupted when you did, because we had professors and attorneys from the University of Houston, one who is titled a bioethicist, who is out there saying that, the unvaccinated are trying to fight to be a protected class, and this is dangerous in all these different ways. And I mean, it literally was just, several hours of people denying the facts around them. I mean, like the comment you chose to say was related to Pfizer, right? And while we're having this conversation, Pfizergate is trending all over Twitter right now. It's trending all over the place because we now know that the Pfizer officials are admitting they didn't test their shots for stopping transmission, even though that's what we've been hearing for the last year plus. And so, I mean, I think what you did was relevant to the national conversation as well, right? So tell everybody what you chose to interrupt with once you got sick of hearing, all the garbage.
All right. Let me just plug my charger in. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah. So basically, they were talking the whole time about, like you said, how the unvaccinated or this or that, or using, like they called medical freedom, bodily autonomy. They call those buzzwords that we use. Like it's just all projection. And, so just hearing all that stuff was just really setting me off. But, so I decided to hit them with something that's not debatable, which is Pfizer got fined $2.3 billion for the biggest criminal conviction in U.S. history for bribing physicians and fudging with test results. I don't know why you would trust them just less than 2 decades later. And so I crashed it with that. And then an individual came to me and he started choking me. Like he tried to put his hand around my neck. And, I giggled. I'm like, what the heck is even going on here? And I just kind of like shove him off me. And he goes flying. And, like a true right winger, just tossed the signs to the side and everybody got pissed.
That's a great. I'm going to keep that line in there. So, look, let's reassess the situation, right? For anybody who's like, because I did see some comments, they were like, well, he's right about Pfizer, but he should have waited to the end. That was disrespectful to interrupt. And look, anybody who's been involved in activism, and if you've gone to these kinds of events, you know very well you're not getting asked. Even like you said, you did it under fake names. You try your best. I've been there too. I tried to go, and I thought I was going to go your route, and then I was like, okay, they're actually taking questions. Let me submit the questions.
Right.
This is an event with Hotez a couple months ago, and then again at the end they decided not to read any questions. I was like maybe on this very thin line between journalistic waiting to ask a question and stalking Hotez. I was like, all right, I'm waiting in a parking garage. He still hasn't come. Maybe I should just, let this one go. But I honestly wish I would have taken your route. And so just anybody who's like, okay, screaming and shouting things, the thing I really hate about this, Alex, is like in that situation, right? You're just the crazy guy. Everybody else in there, they're professionals. They're upstanding citizens. How dare this crazy anti-vaxxer interrupt our nice event, right? But if nobody does that, then none of this stuff is going to get discussed at all. Like clearly they had no intention of bringing up any facts around, what's actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. They try to do this meeting behind closed doors. I mean, I know they live stream it, but as soon as we're onto them, they instantly shut it down. Like they had no plans on privating that live stream. That's for sure. And, during break time, I got to talk to one of the PhDs that spoke there. And, I went, as like an effeminate gay to like, hey, so, I basically kind of debated with her, like saying, oh, my uncle says that Pfizer has the biggest criminal fine. And this PhD that spoke there didn't even know that Pfizer had the biggest criminal fine in history. She's like, well, is there a source for that? Like, it's unbelievable. They just don't know. Like, and that's why, like, I don't know if they're malicious or I don't know if they actually think they're helping something. I think it's mostly narcissism with them and just the fact that they want the credit for saving the world or something. I don't know.
I think that you're onto something with that, right? Like without trying to psychologize these other people, because let's be honest, that's what they try to do with us, right? They try to label us. We're all right-wing Trump supporter, anti-vax, whatever label, right? And again, anybody listening to this, like I think that we recognize that everybody's got difference of, at least I'll say this, difference of opinions and views.
Sure.
But over the last 2 years, I've met so many people who are united by bodily autonomy, individual liberty, and may have totally different political views or voted for different people, but they recognize that. And for those who are watching on screen, this is the situation as it played out from their cameras. And so we were able to clip this from the live stream before they took it down. And, at this point, you can kind of hear there's some kind of rumbling going on. It was funny because when I was watching it, I was like, man, is this guy getting like thrown to the ground? And then, of course, no, it's you just kind of, let me see if I can pull it up, tossing this dude. And of course, it's been made into a GIF that we got to share real quick. But this is the guy coming at you. It was an older gentleman. I don't know why he thought he was just going to come choke you and have no repercussions. But and again, that's not like we're condoning violence or anything. But, you're defending yourself. Really, is all that happened was you decided to defend yourself against somebody who violently came at you because, in my mind, that person has to either be so programmed or so triggered, that how dare this person question the vaccines? How dare this person question Pfizer? Like you said, they're coming to simp for big pharma. I think there's definitely some kind of programming on this. And I do tend to think that there's some correlation between folks who are highly educated and look at maybe folks like you, folks like me, people watching this and think we're too stupid to know what's really going on, right? We don't got the degrees on our walls back here, right? So clearly these crazy people, and they're shouting about some alleged thing about Pfizer. I never heard of that. That can't be true, right? Like, and I'm the PhD here, so clearly I know. I think it can be as simple as that. Like maybe not everybody is acting, some paid agent acting maliciously. They've just sort of drank the Kool-Aid and they think because they're so intelligent that there's no way that they could be wrong. I mean, I think it could be that simple.
Right. I mean, it's the term useful idiot. And, I think what it is, gosh, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought for a second. No, but yeah, there's such thing as over-education. Like, and I think a lot of them, like I call the whole COVID thing revenge of the nerds, basically. Like everybody, they have their power now. And I think what it is, they were losers. Not saying high school's everything, but they were losers in high school. They didn't have too many friends growing up. And they cope with the fact that they can't find like a partner to have kids with, so their whole existence is that piece of paper like that. It's like their whole thing is a big giant cope, I think. And, so they inflict that on others when people question, because it's so fragile because their whole life is a piece of paper to them. And, just so that's, and, there is, like I said, there is such thing as being overeducated. They're getting their education from the top down. So whatever is fed to them, they believe it's true because that's education. That's the piece of paper
Yeah.
that has to be true. So, rather than, so when you're overeducated, there's no critical thinking going on. Like the more educated you are, the less your critical thinking comes into play.
Yeah, and I think part of that definitely plays into what we've seen the last 2 years, which is folks at that, again, with that high of a degree, they look down on people who don't have those degrees in that paper. And then when they have another person who has that same degree telling them this is the worst thing ever, get the shot, they're like, oh, I'm going to trust the person who has the paper like I have, not these other uneducated idiots out there on the internet, right? Like, and so, again, thank you for taking the time to speak up and to, the guy came at you, you tossed them aside. What happened? I mean, they just escorted you out of the building. What happened after that?
No, I just kind of walked out. It was a very crowded event, so I didn't want to catch COVID or anything. It was a super spreader event. So I did the responsible scientific thing and walked out. And then the cops were down the street, and, it was Rice University cops. So I just waved them down because I knew it would have to come to me showing them the video anyway. So I wasn't about to go run. And, I showed them the video, and surprisingly, the cops were like, oh, that's self-defense. You're good to go. Do you want to press charges on him? And, at the time I was like, nah, I'm good. But I'm trying to find out who he is now because, seeing like the comments and the support that I got from this and, basically seeing what they did to Alex Jones, I'm like, okay, well, it's time to hit back at them. Time to stop being the nice guy. Like, screw this. So I'm trying to find this guy currently.
Hey, well, if anybody listening to this can identify him, there's definitely some good close-ups in the videos that are out there. So I don't think it should be too hard. And I think you're right. Look, whether it's this guy or just in general, that idea that, well, we're the side, loosely, people who are questioning COVID, let's say that, right? Sure. Questioning shots, who have been censored, banned, deplatformed, PayPal removed, financial resources taken away, right? Yeah. And like you said, maybe at some point there does need to be an effort to say, hey, look, somebody just came at me violently because he didn't like what I said. And the other side needs to know that you can't get away with that, because we've seen the last 2 years the vitriol for people who are and I don't know or care your vaccinated status. It's not my business. But the people who chose to get not vaccinated, we've seen this like vitriol against them. They should be fired. They should be cast out of society. I'm going to go laugh at their funerals if they die. These kinds of, empathetic and compassionate things that we hear, right? That at some point there needs to be a message of like, hey, you can't just think it's okay to come after people, whether physically, otherwise, like because they have opinions or views that you don't like. I mean, so I support that fully. If you can find him, yeah, maybe there is a case there.
Yeah.
Well, let's if you won't mind, brother, I'd love to hear more about some of the other stuff you do. I got your Rumble channel pulled up, and I know you have a YouTube and maybe some other platforms you're on. But what you normally do, I think, is related in some ways. It's maybe a different field, but it's calling out insanity, let's say, and calling out corruption and dark things. And my regular listeners know that this is a topic that I focus on quite a bit journalistically: child abuse, sexual abuse, predators, pedophilia, these kinds of things, whether the local guy in your neighborhood or a politician, right? Like, I think it all matters, right? Sometimes people only focus on the salacious, like, was there a celebrity involved? Was there a politician involved? Right. But what you show is that, like, this is just people all around us all the time doing these kinds of things. So tell us about what Predator Poachers is, how you got started doing this, and just whatever you want to share on that.
Yeah, so we started Predator Poachers in 2019. At first, I called it the ghetto Walmart version of Chris Hansen, but now I think we evolved into something more than that. So we're high school friends who came together, started posing as kids online, and just like the Chris Hansen show, online predators message who they believe to be kids, and we confront them. Now, the difference with us, and I'd say a lot of these people that do this, is we pose as super young. So, the average age we pose as is 11 years old, and we've posed as young as 5 years old, 8 years old, and we've caught people going after infants because we float around like, oh, I have a little sister, by the way, who's only 1. And predators go after that. So I think we expose the sickest of the sickest and worst of the worst. And we travel the country confronting them on camera, then handing over their confession to law enforcement. And that's resulted in an arrest in, as far as I know, 35 states. More are coming soon because investigations are ongoing in states we haven't had arrests in yet. But so that's what we do. And we post the videos on our Rumble Predator Poachers and other platforms.
Have you, so I mean, obviously, like, you're a bigger dude. The video that we just talked about showed you can stiff arm if you need to, you can
Yeah,
toss
yeah.
somebody aside if you need to. But have you ever found yourself like in a situation where a predator tried to, like, I've seen some of the videos I was watching where you guys kind of like, hey, you're not going anywhere, you wait here till the cops show up after you confront them. But has anybody ever tried to get violent with you, or anything like that?
Um, there was one guy in 2019 that like viciously scratched the cameraman. He was like a 5'5", little wimp dude. But as for getting confrontational with me, I mean, just one also who's just very small. But there has been times where we've been threatened with weapons before, and that's like, you have to kind of be persuasive and be a used car salesman and convince them to like not use the weapon and stuff like that. And that's very that's very testing, I'd say.
Yeah, you seem to exercise some level of like conflict resolution, de-escalation skills. Just maybe it's just your nature, but from the videos I've watched, obviously when you're confronting people with something like this, and you can just see it, their minds like, oh my god, I've been caught. Wait, like, is there any way around this? You're like, no, buddy, we got you. We got all the text. Like, just chill out. You can see them trying to just figure out, like, should I run? Who are these people? What's going on, right? Is that something that you just developed over time, or just naturally diplomatic with people?
Yeah, I would say that's something that got developed because doing this across the country, all the detectives watch the videos in the jurisdiction. So, they give me tips on like, hey, instead of this, open with this or say this. And, from there, it's definitely been, from there, it's definitely like, they teach me human nature of these people, and it's really helped a lot. So it's, morphed me into definitely better than I was 3 years ago. And yeah, no, it is all about de-escalating what they're doing and minimizing it. So, for example, like, oh, you're going after an 11-year-old? Okay, but, you wouldn't do this to an 8-year-old, would you? Like, no, of course not. Like, okay, well, now I understand. And, I mean, that somehow works on them. And then, saying stuff like, there's like really bad people online that want to grape people without the G. I know we're going to be on the radio here, and that want to like kidnap these people. Like, I know you wouldn't do something like that. They're like, no, of course not. So basically, you got to kind of pedestalize them compared to the rest of the people like them. And that's what kind of gets them to open up. And then, this detective in Odessa, Texas, shout out to Detective C. I'm not going to say his name, but he basically told me this line that says, hey, I don't think you need trouble. I just think you need some help. And that gets them in a whole different mode. Like, you're their friend. And of course, like dropping jokes here and there, like just kind of lightening the mood up, saying, yeah, it's not that serious. It's like a conversation. Just make it like that.
Yeah, no, you do a great job of that, and I've heard you use those lines as well, and I do think it's interesting just how the psychology of it. This person obviously is in pursuit of something very messed up that none of us here support or condone or anything like that, and then just by kind of like, man, oh, it was not that bad. Like, don't worry, like this could have been much worse, or whatever line you might throw in there. They do seem to sort of like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, this guy sees me as a human. I'm, even though it's like the cops are on the way, bro, that doesn't mean anything's changing, but let me just make you feel okay for a moment. And it does seem to work on them. And in fact, it seems like some of them get more talkative with you after that.
Yeah. And it's all about like, when they answer a question, how you don't like it, you got to rephrase the question. Like this video that's I'm going to drop soon. This guy admitted to having, CP, for those of you that know the abbreviation of that, CP on his phone, but he said no at first, but then I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not porn, but maybe just naked pictures of young ladies under 18. He's like, oh yeah, just pictures though. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then the cops come like a second later and just punk him out. It was so funny.
Wow, man, I appreciate that work you're doing. Just one last thing. Would you advise anybody else to get into that if they're interested, or does this feel like it's a special set of skills people need to have?
Oh man, well, when I first started doing this, the people that were doing it already, they were just so, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, or, oh no, this is only for. So look, I encourage anybody to go expose a predator, but do it in a way like research the laws, do it in a way that isn't going to screw up a case. Like for example, using nude photos to send to preds, that can screw it up. I'm not talking about get pictures of kids, obviously, but even like finding a nude to send like from online and just sending it saying, it's me. Don't do stuff like that. I made that mistake, very early on, of course, and don't message first. Like basically, do it in a way to where a PD can look at it and say, okay, this person wasn't entrapped or enticed in any way, and this person went out of his way to go be a predator. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely don't want to end up in a situation where you feel like you found somebody who is up to stuff and then they get off because your approach was wrong, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely something to consider. Well, thank you so much for your time, brother. Thank you for speaking up at the Texas vaccine policy. Sorry you had somebody tickle your throat for a moment, but at least you handled it well. And keep fighting, man, to expose the predators. And anything else you want to leave us with? Any links you want to mention or anything like that?
Thank you for having me on. We'll definitely do it again. And if you want to follow us on Rumble, it's Predator Poachers. That's Predator and then Poachers, like poaching elephant. And the Twitter is I Fight for Kids. That is completely spelled out.
Awesome. Guys, we've been talking with Alex Rosen of Predator Poachers, somebody speaking up for truth in a number of different ways. We'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to Live Free, Think Free. That was Ganesha, That Day Long. Awesome song there. Micah, where can they find that?
Everywhere.
Okay, cool. We'll look up That Day Long from Ganesha if you enjoyed that song. And before that, we had that interview I recorded a couple days ago with Alex Rosen of Predator Poachers, who also was at the Texas Vaccine Symposium and was choked for calling out Pfizer. What'd you think about that interview, Micah, and some of the work he does?
I thought it was interesting, and I always like the interviews that just discover little things like that in like crossovers where you discover the guy because of the vaccine conference, and then he's also doing this. The only thing I kind of wish you'd asked him how many so many times we've covered here. A number of these predators have unfortunately been figures of authority, and I just wondered, if he could have waxed a little bit on that. Does he run into that, or is it just sensational headlines that happen? Oh, but there's obviously we've covered it for a reason. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I thought it was interesting. He titled the video "Big Pharma Zombie Attacks Him" or something. So that was kind of interesting. But that's what it seemed
Yeah.
like. Some guy just like was possessed. Like it's not like he was a real goon that could go up there and silence the opposition. He's coming
No,
at
it
the guy
was.
uphill too. It looked like like he's coming from a disadvantaged point to what, like touch him with his phone. I don't
Like
know.
I
Maybe
said, it seemed like he was so triggered by what he was asking, or the fact that he would ask a question or interrupt the event that he would just like and just ran up and tried to choke him. And this guy is kind of seems like a feeble older gentleman and just gets tossed to the side. And the interesting thing is, if when you watch the video a couple times, you notice that when you hear the reactions of the people in the crowd, they don't really react when the guy tries to choke him, but they react when he defends himself. Then they're like, oh. So I don't
didn't
know. It was
help
kind of
the
weird.
you didn't help the weaker guy have his voice heard. I mean, they can't handle that. No, but I thought that was kind of just absurd. I don't know where that comes from, and I could see maybe trying to tell him, look, even if they were criminals, that's an ad hominem argument. This vaccine stuff's pretty good. We should take it more often. Whatever. But like that's what kind of argument is lunging at the guy with a half-hearted attempt to do what? So
Yeah.
he gets a
Well,
bunch of
all right.
spins out of it, and we get to discover about how he actually works against, in a way, how he's able to work against people that would be violating people. Um,
Absolutely. I
so
think it's pretty crazy work.
yeah, that's kind of interesting as far as a solution outside the state that does something to. I mean, obviously turns them over to the state in the end,
Yeah.
but that does something to at least reveal in a journalistic way these people that would violate people, and I think that's the main thing
Absolutely.
we're always talking about, right? Someone's going to go push themselves on another person, and that's the problem with this, and why I think we have such a distaste when it's another story of a figure of authority doing it. But yeah, let's move on. I definitely
Yeah,
did
let's do
enjoy
it.
that.
Yeah, if anybody wants to check him out, again, his name is Alex Rosen. He is at I Fight for Kids on Twitter and maybe Instagram as well, and on Rumble and maybe YouTube. He's known as Predator Poachers. But let's go ahead. Look, I titled this episode "The VR Headsets Are Personal Surveillance Tools." Might seem like a pretty obscure title, but these next two stories are related to that, and it just kind of caught my eye because I think this is something that is going to these are the new ways, Micah, that we have to consider surveillance that aren't, we're already kind of used to certain things, like, for example, facial recognition cameras, even if people aren't aware of them, being surrounded by them. And they're not in every city, every country, but places like Houston, places like New York, London, other big cities, definitely there's facial recognition cameras, there's CCTVs, there's automatic license plate readers at toll booths and elsewhere, there's gunshot detectors, there's, all kinds of different tools that are in the big cities. But we're moving now more and more to that age of the surveillance is kind of like the home surveillance, right? Like the Google Nest or the Echoes or the Alexas, all the different things that people put in their home that are listening to them at all times. And then now the Ring doorbell cameras and these kinds of tools. Well, as more and more people are exploring the metaverse and whatever that's going to look like, whatever it's going to be, and companies like Meta, the formerly known as Facebook, the company that owns Facebook, they are rolling out their virtual reality headset. I also have another one I'll show you in a moment about Apple. It's the same concern. But these headsets, they look nice and futuristic, but they are, according to investigation by Wired Magazine just published a couple days ago, they're harvesting personal data right off your face. Cameras inside the device that track eye and face movements are said to be able to make an avatar, which is, your virtual representation, expressions more realistic, but they raise new privacy concerns. And so pretty much what it's saying is in November 2021, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook announced, like, here's our virtual reality world. And they, announced they were going to be moving into the beginning of the metaverse and stuff like that. And nobody was really impressed at all. Like the device, the graphics look kind of old school 1990s computer. The headsets haven't been that great. And so that's kind of where things have been. And it seems like in an effort to make the avatars more realistic and movements more realistic, they are adding more cameras and things of this sort. So it says here, the new model adds a set of 5 inward-facing cameras that watch a person's face to track eye movements and facial expressions, allowing an avatar to reflect their expressions, smiling, winking, or raising an eyebrow in real time. The headset also has 5 exterior cameras that will, in the future, help give avatars legs that copy a person's movement in the real world. So think about that. That means everything in the entire house is going to be recorded, or at least in the room you're in. Not only 5 cameras on the inside facing you, watching your eyes and facial expressions so that your digital avatar can mimic that, but then 5 exterior cameras, I guess, aimed at your legs, but obviously they could see the room and anybody in the room. And one of these critics say that they think that the default offsetting, which Meta has announced at the moment for face tracking, that won't last long. He says, quote, "It's been clear for some years that animated avatars are acting as privacy loss leaders. This data is far more granular and far more personal than an image of a face in a photograph." So yeah, and it goes on to describe more about how Facebook wants the headsets to be able to capture nonverbal expressions and gestures. How do they do that? Well, they do that by, getting more into your business, into not only watching you with cameras, but studying you and trying to understand you and things like that. So this article from Wired goes on. It's pretty good. Again, this will all be linked at thehoustonfreethinkers.com, but I want to mention this second one as well. This is from biometricupdate.com. Imagine the web pointed cameras back at you. That's what the metaverse will be like. And so this is interesting because it's talking not only about the story we were just touching on, but another example. It says, maybe people in the metaverse will have digitally represented payment and ID cards, for instance, or Apple will transplant its model for alleviating its customers of their need to use most passwords. But it says, in any case, anyone hoping to have a full life while wearing opaque goggles while sitting in a coffee shop will have to surrender their voice, face, iris, and or fingerprint to someone else. And there's no reason to stop there. Heartbeats, breath, ear canal structure, anything biometric can and someday will be ID currency. And they talk about Wired writing about this. But again, let's get to the Apple. It says here, it launched in 2013. This piece published about Apple. Apple is expected to launch its line of virtual reality headsets and content next year with iris scanners for ID verification. So now Apple's getting into the virtual reality headset, and in order to put it on and make sure nobody else can wear your headset, it scans your irises as soon as you put it on. And this is not new ground for Apple. Recent iPhones scan either fingerprints or faces and compare the data to biometrics that users store beforehand. And I think that's one potential example. If I wouldn't trust Apple, but let's say if it's locked in your own, like kind of like with crypto, if you have your own keys, if you got your own biometric fingerprints, your own biometric face print, and you own it, and nobody else, like a company owns that information or owns that data, which they already do because it's on Facebook and elsewhere. Then that's different, that you're voluntarily choosing to do it. But again, I wouldn't trust a company like Apple. To Apple's credit, they claim the initial scans are stored on the devices and not on the cloud. But there's no way, I don't know. That's up to you if you want to trust them. And they go on to talk about, using your voice as password and different ways that biometrics are going to be used, not only for security, claims of security, but in the metaverse, like this VR headset conversation we're having here. So what do you think about this, Mike? I mean, I know some of this to some people probably seems still very totally new, and like basically maybe too sci-fi for them to really grasp at the moment. But I mean, this is the world we're moving into now. This is the world of cameras everywhere, the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, and then going into these metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality, and devices like this. I think they'll be able to sell it to people by saying, look, your avatar is going to be more realistic if you kind of sacrifice a little bit of that privacy so we can have all these cameras on you, and then you'll look cool when you're in the metaverse.
Yeah, obviously there'll be a whole group of people just willingly jumping in and wanting, this, but there's a whole bunch of people who willingly jump in and want all kinds of self-destructive things. You know what I'm saying? I mean, really, look at the number of just casualties of all kinds of bad behavior there are in the world. So, I mean, maybe it's not that extreme, but I don't know, it goes pretty far. It goes pretty far. And the other thing is, to think that anybody would like that, how they can harvest this to make money. It's the same thing. I was thinking about this, like as silly as it sounds, with like cigarettes, as they started adding more and more chemicals and all this stuff, and just trying to put it in advertising and get it all over the movies and just get everyone smoking, and how they tried to, keep it quiet, some of the dangers. Like, come on, do you not think that technology is in a way like smoking? I mean, no, it isn't like know-how like technology is, but it's like it insofar as we're dealing with, like, your average person doesn't know how their car works, how their computer works, what all these things do. They don't recognize the information that they're giving these companies. I mean, one of the stories we've got that we probably won't have time for, but at least I'll mention a headline, is how Google's incognito in a lawsuit is being revealed never to have been incognito, and that executives and people working there were laughing about, basically how not it was, and selling it to the people as though it was some sort of, defense. So I think there's something to be said
Let's
for,
get into that one.
yeah, I do think there's something to be said for these type of privacy lawsuits that we're starting to have, and I have a few stories around them. And if we can't get them all today, we can get into them in the future. But yeah, so let's see this one here about Google. Did I even must be messing with you, and it didn't even make it onto the tab here. But yeah, basically that there.
I think it's what you're saying, right? That they found out Google really isn't incognito mode, doesn't do anything basically, and they knew that.
Yeah, that's the actual article. I just was having trouble pulling it up. But yeah, and I do think there's some interesting things here. They do say how they were, they got these documents out of court records from prior Google legal actions. So, I mean, this has been going on. They joke about the incognito mode being like Guy Incognito when Homer from The Simpsons puts on a bumbling disguise, putting on a mustache, and so I guess, people like DuckDuckGo and these other people are paying really close attention to this because, they're representing that they were selling a product that they weren't. And they're saying that this can be billions of dollars worth of damages if they're found, guilty. It could be, $100 to $1,000 per violation. And then it becomes, what's a violation? A single search, it would seem like, would be a violation, right? I mean, if you're told your search is, private, but it's not, and you've been led to believe that, like cigarettes are healthy, then, how much is that worth? Every single time you've been compromised in that way. So I thought it was,
I would say this one part here, Micah. It says they contend that Chrome's in-browser experience misleads people into believing they are enjoying truly private browsing when they are not.
That's pretty much the sum of it. And then there's all the money.
I mean, but that's like, I guess what they're trying to argue in court is that, like, Google, even though they don't exactly say that it's a privacy thing, the way that it's promoted and incognito and all this, the way they market it, it gives the illusion, or at least it kind of gives the appearance. And then you're saying there's internal emails that have language saying that they agree, basically, or that some employees think
they know already that it's not, private in any regard, and in that way, yet they're still pitching it as if it advances, some of their protections and privacy. So I think that's the most damning evidence of all, so it's something
they got their own employees, speaking out and saying, like, this is not what we're telling people. Yeah, well, I mean,
they knew that it was not truly private, and that it was needed a number of improvements to increase the user's trust, because people were starting to question Google. No longer did it seem that they were do no evil. It had started to change a little bit, and once it changes a little bit from do no evil, that's a pretty severe change, I would imagine, right? So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and continue with one or two more stories before we get out of here tonight. Yeah, we're not going to have time for everything, but I know you got one you want to get into, at least another one. I got your inflation one pulled up, or maybe the California gun owners one, whichever you prefer. But I wanted to mention this one, and I think this will be a spicy one because fans of this show, listening audience, is pretty divided or maybe not as divided as I think. But there's some people who think that there's no such thing as the COVID-19 virus, and I tend to be open to that idea because various things. There's others who go beyond that and say there's no such thing as viruses at all, that none of them exist. It's all been a hoax since the beginning of virology. The whole thing's a scam. And because of that, they argue, they have to argue against other things. And so they claim like claims of bioweapons and the gain of function, labs and all that research, all those millions and billions of dollars, that's just like a distraction. They're like, we don't know exactly what they're doing, but they're definitely not working on viruses and weaponizing them because there's no such thing as viruses. Now, that doesn't mean they couldn't be weaponizing other types of, I guess, things. But anyways, I preface all that to say, if you can handle this story, whatever your opinions are, I think it's interesting. Exclusive from the Daily Mail. This is playing with fire. It could spark a lab-generated pandemic. Experts slam Boston lab where scientists have created a new deadly COVID strain with an 80% kill rate. Now, I know that sounds kind of sensational, but there's some facts behind this. Researchers added Omicron spike protein to the original Wuhan COVID strain. Omicron spike is highly mutated, which made it the most infectious variant ever. 8 in 10 mice they claim infected with the lab-created strain died at Boston University lab. Now, again, I know my friends who say there's no COVID-19, and again, there's no evidence of isolation would say, well, what are they using? They're claiming Omicron or Wuhan or this and that, but if it hasn't been isolated, what were they using to infect these mice? And, I don't have the study. I don't know if it links here. I encourage everybody to look further into it. I'm just reporting what they're claiming. There could be another reason somebody wants us to be reading this and saying, oh my God, there could be a variant that's going to kill 80% of people, right? Maybe that's just fear tactic. Maybe this is all lies. I don't know. I'm just sharing it with you. DailyMail.com revealed that the team has made a hybrid virus combining Omicron and the original Wuhan strain that killed 80% of mice in a study. This is Boston University scientists. The revelation exposes how dangerous virus manipulation research continues to go on even in the U.S. despite fears of similar practices may have started the pandemic. Professor Shmuel Shapira is a leading scientist in the Israeli government. He said, quote, this should be totally forbidden. It is playing with fire. Gain of function research, when viruses are purposefully manipulated to be more infectious or deadly, is thought to be at the center of COVID's origin. Again, obviously, there's a lot of theories around this. So Dr. Richard E. Bryant, chemist at Rutgers University, and I don't trust that guy if you know his history, but he says this research is a clear example of gain of function research. If we are to avoid a next lab-generated pandemic, it is imperative that oversight of enhanced potential pandemic pathogen research be strengthened. So yeah, like I said, maybe there's something else going on here. Here's some pictures of biosafety 4 labs. This could all be, yeah, I'm sure some of you say this is all fake. It could be. I don't know. Anyways, I just wanted to share that, Micah, because it's it's one of the things out there, and it is being picked up by other people, not just the Daily Mail. This reports from the research being done at the University of Boston that is being labeled gain of function research, and just more and more information is coming out. I also want to say, just add to this, that in the last week, Pfizergate, hashtag Pfizergate, has been trending all over Twitter and other places because of recent admissions by some of the heads of Pfizer that they didn't test their shots for stopping transmission, even though that's what we were all told, right? If you get the shot, it's going to stop transmission. You won't get sick. You can go back to work. Now they're all claiming they never said that. And if you look it up, that's supposedly, there's fact checkers out there to tell you that is garbage. It's not real. We never claimed it was going to stop transmission. So, yeah, and this all started because a European member of parliament was questioning one of the Pfizer corporate members, and the clip got 14 million plus views in a couple of days just last week, probably more by now. And yeah, lots of people asking questions, and the fact checkers are working overtime to try to convince people that there's nothing afoot, nothing to ask. But yeah, what do you make of all that, Micah? Got any thoughts on any of that?
Fact checkers just trying to, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. For a while, people have been studying bioweaponry and biomanipulation, genetic manipulation, this sort of thing. And, it takes us people talking about, oh, this should be banned. And then there's the part that can be saying, oh, yeah, it's illegal for you to go make a little bitty firecracker, but, these people can do this. So in the sense, you think maybe it should be banned, but like, where's that going to really lead to? What's it going to lead to? You think people are going to quit doing this, or it's just going to go underground? And if it goes underground, meaning but to the medical, biomedical, industrial warfare machine, so if it goes underground, they'll have all the knowledge about it, cures and where the state of the science really is. So I don't know. I think it has been creeping for a while. I don't think it's any joke. I mean, there's all kinds of stories out there from credible news agencies that say things about, you know, things that would lead one to believe they were studying gain of function, and reason to believe they were studying virology in a way that could increase the transmission or deadliness of diseases. When you see these different articles, such as PPP equipment being purchased ahead of the outbreak, stuff like that, large amounts of it. Why? If you weren't doing dangerous stuff, why would you need so many fire extinguishers? That sort of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how you would regulate such a thing except by maybe stopping funding or examining funding of these large corporations that are, studying viruses. I mean, that's about all I think you could do. And then what? You'd have some government agency overseeing it, and perhaps, steering it along a course they could try to use the narrative control machine to explain as best. I don't know, but I think people should.
Yeah, it's hard to trust anything, right? I mean, no matter what, even if they claim there was going to be some accountability, how would we really know? Guys, you're listening to Live Free, Think Free here on the Conscious Resistance Network. Micah, I got these two pulled up. If you wanted to go over your
I
IRS
think
one
we
or
should get
California
even though the inflation one hitting the IRS is pretty cool, and there's some other things like Missouri getting out of BlackRock to the tune of $500 million. I think that we should go with the California judge blocking
okay.
sharing gun owners' information, because it sticks with what we're talking about from the beginning of this episode on, about Fourth Amendment and privacy rights and stuff like that, more than guns. But it is all about guns. So Gavin Newsom, he signed this assembly bill. It's a state bill in Cali. Assembly Bill 173 into law last September, requested that the Attorney General Bonta send personal information on gun purchasers to the State Firearm Violence Research Center at the University of California, Davis. Gun owners' information included when and where they purchased the guns, as well as details about buyers' names, addresses, dates of birth, and what they purchased. The research center was also authorized to share the data with other research institutions outside UC Davis. Judge McCall noted that the state accused the plaintiffs of failing to establish irreparable harm, because this is actually part of a lawsuit. So plaintiffs were saying, look, this law, getting this information out has damaged us. We shouldn't have to have our information exposed. And the state's like, no, they need to. They're not being harmed. But the judge said, no, that doesn't really matter, because the information in question, the state says it doesn't matter because the information in question has already been shared with researchers as early as November. But the judge says, it does, because it doesn't account for the potential ongoing and future harms that could occur by continuous use of information. And I think that's important, because a lot of times it's easy, people get lackadaisical. They're like, oh, this has been happening, there's no way we can really go back. Well, there is a way to recognize when something's continued use is more harmful than changing course. And that's kind of what this judge is saying. He says also there was a June data breach that prompted the California Justice Department to remove its firearms dashboard portal from its website. And furthermore, and even while this motion was pending before the court, a massive data breach reportedly occurred that leaked personal identifying information about firearm databases for concealed carry applicants in or about June of 2022, the judge added. So the judge, he's up to snuff on privacy concerns, it seems. And obviously something we've talked about probably from the first weeks of this show, these databases leaking people's information, and how you can't really trust these places to be safe. And so I guess, I think that's, it's relevant because you've got here an individual, maybe it's part of checks and balances or something, but you've got this individual judge standing up against this, saying people don't have to give up all their information just because they choose to have a weapon to defend themselves, or just to have a weapon. It's kind of like the bus thing. People don't give up their right just to ride the bus. People don't give up their right just to be able to defend themselves. And I think that's probably good, because once you are named
That's
in
a pretty good win.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I figure it's consistent with the show, so we needed to.
I think that's definitely a pretty good win. I mean, like you said, we'll see how it goes, how it's implemented, where it goes from there, if there's an appeal, if it gets overturned, all that kind of stuff. But that's a pretty good, it seems like a reasonable victory, right? And those little things are important. They don't always come. We talked about that earlier in the show about kicking the TSA out and, actually feeling the impact of your actions. Well, if you're involved in that, whoever's involved in that fight, I'm sure they feel pretty good to have that ruling there.
Congratulations, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's about it, man.
We have so many people working for freedom in so many diverse little ways, people here and there, individual small steps, and then, our own use of freedom in our lives. I think it's all a function of those two things. So it's been a great episode, Derrick, and I thank everybody who's been listening in. And I look forward to next week's episode, and I hope you'll submit music or stories to us, and you know how to reach us. If you're not paying attention, you can go check out all these stories at the HoustonFreethinkers.com. You can, dig in deeper. You could find more. You could even drop some stories that refute what we're saying, and we'd be happy to, post some of those comments up there. We like to keep it active, So thanks, everyone.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm going to end with, we played this a while back, but I think it's just such a powerful speech. It's only 5 minutes long, but I'm going to we'll close out tonight with this short speech from Max Blumenthal at one of the Defeat the Mandates rallies. I think it was in Los Angeles earlier this year or last year. And then we'll play a song too, but we'll see you guys next week. Peace.
I'm Max Blumenthal from thegrayzone.com, and I regret to inform you that I'm a member of the media. The worst profession in the country. Actually, I'm one of the good ones. We'll talk about that in a second. I want to talk about what's been happening in the world for the last 2 years, because for 2 years, we have seen one of the biggest grassroots movements unfold before our eyes. The medical freedom movement, which has seen millions of people around the world march against unscientific, anti-worker mandates in their own societies, from the indigenous Bolivians of El Alto to Moroccans of Casablanca to Iranians in Tehran, from Beirut to Berlin to Boston to Los Angeles. And what is this about? It's about decent working people around the world trying to hold on to their humanity, their basic rights, their bodily autonomy, and their very sanity in the face of a cold and ruthless machine that seeks to reduce every individual to a QR code and condition their participation in society and their very ability to work on their willingness to take an experimental gene therapy. That is unacceptable. And you know what else is unacceptable? Those who try to make this into a right versus left issue. All they're trying to do is confuse, divide, hoodwink, and bamboozle on behalf of the billionaire class that represents the real winners of this pandemic. This is not about left versus right. This is about our economic rights, our human rights, and our constitutional rights. And that's why we're here today. We've watched for the past 2 years as Big Pharma and its oligarchic investors puppeteered our governments, putting the FDA and CDC in its back pocket while turning our politicians into corporate sales reps, guaranteeing Pfizer and Moderna combined profits of $65,000 per minute, using your bodies as profit centers while working class Americans suffered the sharpest increase in poverty in 50 years. We've watched the wealth of the world's 10 richest men double since the lockdown began. We have watched small businesses be destroyed, entire countries plunge deeper into debt, while the most vulnerable youth were deprived of the right to education. And now in New York City, We watch as wealthy and famous celebrities are allowed to work without a mandate, but healthy firefighters, medical workers, and teachers, people doing the most important jobs in this country, are not allowed to work because they disobey the mandate. And we are here to say, let them work! 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 That's right. Listen to me. Listen to the profit-driven, anti-people system that I'm describing here. I'm sorry, but this is not socialism. This is corporatism. When we live in a corporate state, a ruthless, imperialist corporate state that exists in a permanent state of war and which divides to conquer and which created a false division between the vaccinated and unvaccinated in order to further shatter the solidarity of the 99%. I want to tell you about the most courageous journalist of our time. His name is Julian Assange. Make noise for Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange! Julian Assange, before he was a political prisoner, reminded us that every war of our lifetime, from Vietnam to Iraq to the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, has been sold to us with the lies of the corporate media. And this too is true of the war waged on the people of this country under the banner of a pandemic. Today, as we know, Julian Assange sits in a maximum security prison for exposing the lies of the national security state, and they are trying to kill him. And the same corporate apparatus that silenced Assange has set out to censor and smear anyone who has called out the lies that have given rise to a biomedical security state. Under the corporate state, character assassination, censorship, and official silencing is the price of telling the truth. And we understand that at the Gray Zone, and we will never stop telling the truth. And so I'm here on behalf of the part of the media that is still independent and still disobedient and still defiant and still says, F you, we won't do what you told me, to the stenographers and the shills and the war pigs of the corporate state. We will not be silenced, and you will not win. Thank you, LA.
Watch the news, buy that new, follow rules, eat the foods, copy shoes every day cause we program. They'll pick what we choose, all the same, who is who, everything that we do, we program. Watch the news, buy that new, follow rules, eat the foods, copy shoes every day cause we program. They'll pick what we choose, all the same, who is who, everything that we do, we program. They want us brainwashed till we have the same thoughts, say the wrong thing and they'll put us in the same box. One world, one currency and no God. I won't let them piss on me and tell me that it's raindrops. Lies where they selling at, truth they don't tell us that. I don't care if you a Republican or a Democrat, ain't hearing what you telling me. We are not the enemy, they pushing their narrative through these Hollywood celebrities. We living in a matrix, every day the same shit. You don't like the history, you just try to erase it. You don't like something to somebody, you replace it. Everything is sexist, everything is racist, every claim is baseless, everything is tainted. I live my life but the American dream is so tasteless. Time that we face it, I don't fear no man. Why you think they've been calling these TV shows programs? Watch the news, buy that new, follow rules, eat the foods, copy shoes every day cause we program. They'll pick what we choose, all the same, who is who, everything that we do, we program. Watch the news, buy that new, follow rules, eat the foods, copy shoes every day cause we program. They'll pick what we choose, all the same, who is who, everything that we do, we program. Capitalism got us trapped in a prison, killing people over Jordans while they laughing and chilling. The liquor store and fast food got you in a bad mood. Our lives politicized, don't really value criminals, lock up citizens, killing all the witnesses. What type of bullshit is this? The world that we living in. There's an app to find love, there's an app to buy drugs, there's no app to find us. While they're spraying our crops, they want you hating the cops, they want you hating your moms, they want you hating your pops. Want us hating each other, that's how they divide and conquer. Sell your soul if you want an easy way to the top. I've been praying to God, I know we here in the car. They just playing your emotions, got you feeling it all. It's love over here, not that fake stuff neither. I'll deprogram myself, I don't need you. Watch the news, buy that new, follow rules, eat the foods, cop the shoes every day cause we program. They all pick what we choose, all the same, who is who, everything that we do, we program. Watch the news, buy that new, follow rules, eat the foods, cop the shoes every day cause we program. They all pick what we choose, all the same, who is who, everything that we do, we program.
You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.